Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Jaden Springer stream. Um, Started right on time. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I assume more will pile in late, and when they think things start as normal. I would like to welcome our guest, who is Rafael Barlowe from NBA Draft Junkies and Locked On Network. Joining me today, Rafael. How are you doing?
Doing good. Super busy at this time of year, but I mean, it's always good to talk basketball. So all is well when I can talk basketball all day.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really gracious for you having me, not just because you got the best set design in the game, but
Got lights. I got a
oh, you
fade
got
light.
everything. I mean, you were more prepared for this than I could ever be. I mean, you got a whole studio. It's living good. So
It's all fake. It cost me like
so
$100 from Walmart.
huh. That's what everybody says. That's what they all say. Yeah, it's just so easy for you. So tell me, what are your priors with Jaden Springer? Were you a follower from the AAU days? Did you just start with his year at Tennessee? Tell me your background with Springer.
So I really started following him this year at Tennessee. There's a part of me that likes to be a little bit unbiased towards the prospects as they enter their freshman year. I mean, I like AAU, but then I feel like sometimes, and I had this conversation with Chad Ford today, like there are some guys that if you didn't know them prior to AAU, would they be considered a first round pick? Are some guys, their draft status, is it based off of what they did in high school as opposed to what they did in college? So for some players, I try to be as unbiased, and then I'll watch their college film, and then if I can find if it's on Adidas or Nike, then I'll go watch their AU stuff after I watch their college film to come up with a fair evaluation. So Springer's a guy that I really started paying attention to his game at Tennessee.
So I'm a long time Springer stockholder. Like I mean, from his time in North Carolina before he even went to IMG, I had been tipped off to him, and um, so for me, this was sort of I sort of come from this in the opposite perspective, where I come with a whole bunch of those bias and priors, expecting a certain level, and then having to sort of explain the difference. Because I mean, this year Tennessee went fine. I wouldn't say it went amazing. Um, what was your first impression of Springer coming in like after the first couple games in Tennessee?
One, just how strong he was. I mean, he's physically ready, I think, body wise, to play in the NBA. You don't really see too many freshmen that are built like that. And then what's even more shocking is he's so young. I think he's one of the
Yes.
youngest players in this draft class. So, I mean, the eye test was there. After the first few games, I felt like I would have liked to see him be a little bit more aggressive. I felt like there were a lot of times where he was, I don't necessarily want to use passive as the word, but I just felt like he could have been a little bit more assertive.
Hmm.
But by him being so young, I think that comes with youth. And he tries to play the right way, and he's not a guy that's just going to chuck up shots and he's looking for stats. So I do like that about his game.
Yeah, I think he is the second youngest American behind Primo. I could be wrong on that. I know that he is almost.
Primo's not even American.
Oh yeah, Primo's Canadian. Yeah,
Yeah.
so he must be the youngest American then.
Yeah.
Sorry to all the Canadians. I do apologize.
North American, so
Yeah,
technically.
yeah, yeah. Let's technically correct. The best kind of correct.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that the thing that really stands out for me with Springer is that like there's a lot of low hanging fruit. Like when I watch him play, I think that in a year of really positive development, he could be something really, really interesting. And that's like a thing I always come back. Like it's always like really jumps out to me because like he is, really physically developed. He does have a lot of defensive positives, and like there are like signals of a different archetype in there. So let's jump over to the film screen. Welcome everybody to Raphael. Um, so the first thing is pathways to separation and advantage. You noted it that like Springer plays within himself. He plays. I was like the right way is definitely a way of putting it. At times, I think he takes what the defense gives him too much, where he's unafraid. He wants to play the right way and not make mistakes, and sometimes that allows him to not create advantages. He doesn't, if there's a little bit too much risk. And I think a thing that really jumps out, in the difference of how people evaluate Springer. Some people have him, towards the second round. Some people have him in the lottery. Some people have him in the top half of the lottery. Is figuring out how he's going to create separation, how he's going to get advantage.
And
Um,
you know what? Not to cut you off. So the thing about Springer that is very interesting to me is I looked at my notes on Frank Ntilikina 3, 4 years ago, and they're almost identical to Springer's. Now, some people may look at that as a negative, and I mean Frank, was a lottery pick, and he definitely hasn't lived up to where he was selected. Some may think he just needs a new change of scenery or whatever. But I felt like there are some similarities just based off of the notes that I had on both players at the same age.
Yeah, there's a comparison that gets right to my heart, but there's certainly people out there who might be more scared by that than anything. I was a huge Frank Ntilikina believer, um, going back to like the U17 stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that for a lot of people, just looking at the blending in and also the concern level about how he gets easy buckets, how he forces defensive rotation is something that Frank hasn't quite figured out yet.
Yeah.
I think one of the differences that I would say between Frank and Springer is that um, Springer has really good body control, but he does kind of the same thing every time. He plays within his body. I mean, like his lower body is really flexible, and his upper body is really inflexible, and I think that can give people difficulties in terms of evaluating him, just because like he gets to spots, well sometimes, and then nothing comes of it because he isn't able to finish over or finish through or to contort himself to find these pretty good windows. What do you make of how Springer moves?
Um, to me, I think it's kind of basic in a
Mhm.
sense. And when I think he's fluid, but when he has the ball, I don't see a lot of fluidity with like his movement. Now, every once in a while, he'll show some flashes. Like there's a play against Florida, I believe, in one of I want to say it's like SEC tournament game where he made a move in transition where he showed a little bit of shake and bake, a guy with an in and out, and he made like an acrobatic finish. But for the most part, I really don't see a lot of, like you said, flexibility in the upper body.
Yeah. The thing is that same like stockiness helps him a lot on defense. He's able to shrink space down. He covers space pretty well. I mean, he's about 6'4" +4 wingspan, I think 4.5. Um, Able to shrink space down, and then when he is covering people in the paint, when he is having taking people on drives where he's shunting them into small space, like you're not moving him off spots.
Yeah.
And I mean, one of the reasons that I was high on Springer is that going into his junior year of high school, he played Jalen Suggs in a Under Armour game, and this point number 3 of shrinking space and then being strong in it made life very very difficult for Jalen Suggs, who's about 15 months older, and that's a thing that's always sort of bored me to Springer. Is like, okay, if we can get enough connecting ideas, we can smooth out some of these rough edges. There's a really interesting defender and a player who can guard multiple positions at that.
Oh yeah.
The next one
Yeah.
is
Chris Paul, James Harden, PJ Tucker, like you can't post up strength. No matter how big the player is or how tall, I don't think you're going to really be able to effectively post him up especially as he gets closer to his prime.
yeah. I think that it's also interesting when people get a little bit of a step on him, he just moves them into a less dangerous spot. Like you think you're going straight at the rim, and suddenly your toes are moving towards your coaching staff on the sideline because he's just bumped you completely off your spot. There's a couple plays like that in I think almost every game where he's not the quickest guy, but if you and him are in a phone booth, you're probably losing.
Yeah.
Um,
And that's
the
all natural strength too.
Yeah, 100%. Um, the next point is, I think, an essential philosophy difference for basically everybody, and something mileage is going to vary on is what exactly is low volume good shooting. So what, like Springer shot 43% from 3 this year, which is awesome. He took like a 3.5 a game. I am a believer that volume is a better predictor of shooting than percentages, and that if you're passing up open shots, it's either because your coaching staff or you personally don't believe in it. Springer's wired to play good to great, so to reject good shots to hunt for great ones. The thing I would like to see most is just have him just get shots up. Like if you're a
Yeah.
little bit open, like things got to flow because he'll take side steps, he'll take step backs, but it's not every time. So what is your read when you're evaluating a prospect who has good numbers but doesn't have the volume to make those numbers necessarily meaningful?
Well, one that's always tough. Is it the system? Is it the coaching staff? Is it a confidence thing? Is it a I don't want to mess up type thing? So that was kind of one of the things that when I compared my notes and I went back and looked at Frank's, that was one of the things I felt about him was that he never really showed. And I mean, there were some games. Like I remember, I want to say it's like one of the championship games at the U18s in Turkey. Frank like took over.
Yep.
Like he showed like this confidence, and I just so happened to be there. I was living in Turkey at the time, and I went to that particular game, which was like the Sekou Doumbouya introduction to the world. So that was like an outlier game to me for Frank. But then when I look at Jaden, I look at games where you're like, oh wow, he took 8 shots, or he only took 9 shots, and I wonder when he goes to the NBA, when he has more talented teammates, is he going to be one of those guys where some games he may take 5 shots? If he's on, he may take 10, but it's I think he's kind of tough to evaluate in that sense because on paper the efficiency looks great.
The other thing is that the jumper itself doesn't look bad. I think that a lot of times, like when you look at really low volume, I think there has to be something wrong. Like maybe their footwork, creates an issue where it's difficult to power up. Like I've seen guys who are really pigeon toed, so they can't shoot off the dribble because they need every ounce of power from catch and shoots. And he doesn't really have anything that would tell you why he doesn't shoot. It doesn't happen, and it's never really happened. Like this isn't high volume in high school, high volume in AAU, low volume in Tennessee. It's pretty low volume and also like a pretty consistent turning down of good shots to drive it into the paint. And there's situations where he's had. I mean, those IMG teams are extremely talented. It very much depends on how he feels. I mean, there were games against Montverde where he took more shots. There were games against lesser teams where he took less. It's very difficult to evaluate, especially from an amateur perspective, where like I can't ask him. I can't ask people around him and just be like, so what's the thought process here? And I think that that's something that everybody who evaluates, whether you're somebody who looks at highlight films for 2 minutes before the draft and picks favorites, to the biggest tape eater and the most analytics driven guy in the entire world who lives and breathes this stuff for 22 hours a day, 365 days a year. You got to have an answer to this question, and it's different for different people. And I think that trying to figure out where you land on the continuum of what does low volume good shooting actually mean is really interesting. The last one is something that we both alluded to, is the cost and benefits of playing up. So many players, especially many American players, enter the draft in their second draft eligible season age-wise. Internationally, it's pretty common for players, if they're good enough, to enter immediately. Like say Pokashevsky, Josh Primo, like players who would probably be best suited for their stock of staying another year, but their age is also an allure. It's that you get a benefit when you're the youngest guy. You play your college basketball season at 17. People like, imagine how good he's going to be when he's the same age as, imagine when everybody's on equal footing. So it's an interesting, we give very similar with like much older players. With much younger players, we have allowances. So we're like, okay, you're going to get punked a little bit, or you're going to have moments where you pass up, open shots because you're, still a young teenager and younger than everybody else in your team. But it also, at times, as an evaluator, allows us to overlook serious flaws and blame them on have guys that like don't have good feel for passing reads, but we assume that it's because of their age, and it's their age and it's the fact that they're not particularly good at passing reads. And so there is, again, this is just one of those areas, like why I find Springer so interesting is that he's the intersection of a lot of really interesting philosophical conversations, and the intersection of a lot of like you bring in every player you evaluate, you bring in your own biases, you bring in your own philosophy, you bring in you bring in yourself to the table. And for some people, they give no benefit to age. It's like, look, you played in the tournament, you played, you don't get a trophy for being the best player at 17. You get the trophy for winning. And I think that this is a really interesting topic and one that is definitely applied differently to different people. Like for as much hype as Primo has gotten, players like Rocco Percussion, who are also young, haven't got the same boost.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's all a matter of opinion, and there's like an allure with youth. Everybody that's, no, I shouldn't say everybody, but for a lot of guys that are young, one of the things you hear around this time is he'll only be 18 on draft day. And it's a positive when you're Springer, but if you're Duarte, Chris Duarte, that is from Oregon, it is like a big negative in a sense. And I think once you get to the NBA, it kind of, some people even say once you get to college, it evens out, whether you're, been held back twice and you're a 19-year-old freshman or you're 17 when you play your first game. And it seems like only in college and around draft time is when you hear, well, this guy is actually 18 months older than this person. Once you get to the NBA, it doesn't matter. But for Springer, I think it has helped him because every time you listen to somebody talk about him, they talk about his age on draft day. And it's almost like with Jalen Suggs, every game you listen to, they said, he used to be a quarterback. With Jaden Springer, every game you listen to, he's only 18 years old. So I think it has helped him out.
Yeah. But it also does meaningfully hurt your performance. Like it is generally bad to be younger than the person you're playing. That's just sort of the way that basketball has worked. So with that, let's dive into this tape. Thank you everybody for joining me. We're watching the SEC championship game versus Alabama. I will note that this game has some interesting camera choices. So sometimes we're going to be having some sliding movements. We're going to have some moments that in the film lab made me a little bit nauseous. Just a heads up, you guys probably won't be seeing it as many times as I did. But overall, just an early warning. So here we kind of get Springer plays off ball a lot. He slides between many positions defensively. In this game he'll check 1 through 4. And here we get a pretty early dig. He has really aggressive hands as a help side defender, which is something that I've have seen jump out. And he also reaches with 2, which is just a personal favorite for me. Here we get some of the stuff that we talked about with playing for the system. We get a hard closeout. Top foot is really high, and there's not really a middle, right? So you would think that this would just be an automatic attack to that middle side, and he doesn't. He kind of jabs at and retreats. Yeah. And then it gets the ball right back. Another aggressive 2-guard probably shoots this. And instead he has to take an 18-foot. Like, he ends up making it, but the process to get there does concern me a little bit because there were probably 2 better pathways for aggressiveness. And he ended up taking one that led to a more difficult and less rewarding shot.
Right, especially when you consider he only shot 28% on pull-up jumpers or jumpers off the dribble.
Yeah. And he that's also those mid-range jumpers were basically the most common shot he took. I think he took 60 something of shots within 17 feet that were jumpers, but weren't shots to the rim. Didn't take any floaters really. Took 7. Took 50 something shots around the rim. So that is most of his diet at Tennessee. A big hang-up that we will talk about is his mobility, especially his mobility finishing. He is a 2-foot jumper exclusively, and it's almost always within his frame. So there are many styles of 2-foot jumpers. You can be a 2-foot jumper and still have a lot of finishing craft, but you'll see when Suggs jumps off too, the ball is almost always center mass above his head. So he finishes basically like he's trying to clap, with 2 hands off. Anytime that there's contact, he goes to a stability finish. And this allows players who have no business getting to the ball to get a hand up. I think that something, even if you're going to stay with 2, that he needs to get is a stride finish into a stride finish into a reverse. So it's the same 2-foot finish. You're going to see left foot, right foot stride, 4 defenders in the paint, roughly same situation we just saw, and then pivot out and a reverse. And you'll see that when this shot gets released, instead of 4 people in the paint, it's just going to be 1. And that's just from the patience, same footwork setup, same 2 feet. There is craft to be added onto this. Again, the stereotype about 2-foot finishers. And this is stuff that has to happen because, like, while Springer grades as a good finisher, basically every time he ran into situations that required craft, he did not have it in his bag, and it's partially just due to the flexibility level.
Yeah, and I mean age.
Yep.
I mean, like a kid like Brunson, you can tell that he's played he has the fundamentals, like the team aspect, but you can tell he's probably played his dad one-on-one, or he has a lot of creativity that you get from actually playing as opposed to drills.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that just like getting the like funkiness, like this is a 2-foot inside hand quick finish before help can come. That's the sort of thing like Springer is just going to need. It's just to add funk, to add weird timing, and to add just craft so that the strength works better, because then people aren't, you have counters for when people do load up on the strength.
Yeah, and when I look at Springer's game, he seems like a guy that has had a trainer his whole life. He's done a lot of drills. He's done a lot of, like the, drills.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see a lot of creativity. And in my opinion, I could be wrong. Your creativity comes from playing your 21, your one-on-one. And he just seems like he's always been in structure as opposed to just the whole street ball. And that's why I feel like even though him and Jalen Brunson may have some kind of similarities, the difference is Jalen Brunson is super crafty. And in my opinion, if Jalen Brunson wasn't crafty, then he's not an NBA player.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that I would be really excited about is getting Springer into like LA basketball culture, where it's just like, we're going to be running 4s on side courts at UCLA, just reps. I mean, the difference in how you can see how he approaches the game, and somebody, in this class we have Mobley, who was raised in that culture, and also like considering how he would work next to like a LaMelo, who is basically a person who's making all these reads based on like, oh, don't worry, it'll be there. Like, well, how do you know that? He's like, I've seen it. Like, it'll be there. Don't even trip.
Yeah.
You can see that like there's just a level of pre-planning rather than an adaptation and a reaction that I'm really excited to see how his processing changes now that like obviously like things are different when you're a pro. Like this to me, this play is sort of a prototypical like approach condition for me. Like we're gonna get a side pick and roll. Even defense is an overload, and it just doesn't do anything with it. Like he sees that defense is an overload, so he pulls it out. And the rest of the possession, like Tennessee has some pretty difficult spacing and requires some like consistent like 12-footers over double teams. But there's moments where there's an opportunity to get advantage, and he doesn't take it because he can see the defense is pretty prepared for it. I would just like to see him force the defense to make that rotation, force the defense to do something. Because, like, I mean, this is a point I hammer home on this platform all the time, is like in the NBA, if you get any advantage, there's no guarantee you get a second advantage on that possession. Like you got to hold on to that thing for dear life.
Yeah.
I do like these camera angles though. They are pretty nice. So a way of getting this, like Malcolm Brogdon is I would say one of my favorites of this is Malcolm Brogdon does karate with his offhand every possession. So this first one you can see he gives a little forearm shove, right? On this pick and roll. The second one he swipes up at Dwight's arm just to get them above his head. Right, so now we have 2 little bits of karate, and then the third one, as he's getting by, he does a little swim move and pushes off Dwight for the third one. And when you watch it the first time, you're like, oh, okay, he blew by 2 people for a dunk. And then you watch it on the reverse angles, you're like, oh no, he grabbed and pulled and did whatever he needed to get by.
And you know what's funny about that? So the first time I started training NBA players, it was Chris Douglas Roberts.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, from Memphis, great scorer. And when I was working with him, me and my brother would play some dummy defense, but we would always leave banged and bruised up because Chris was not like the most athletic guy, but he was very crafty.
Mm-hmm.
But he always had the karate chops like that. Or if he was turning the corner, he knew how to grab your calf so you couldn't put your leg out.
Mm-hmm.
it was just a bunch of really little crafty things. Like if it was a jab step, it was always an elbow to your forearm to get your arms loose, to get a shot up. And that comes with playing like street ball.
Yeah. That comes, I mean, like, that comes from playing your brothers all the time where you just got to figure it out. Like, they're
Yeah.
not going to give you none of these calls. And so it's like, well, my choices are to resort to, like, they're pushing me, so I got to use their violence against them, maybe get them a little bit off balance. That's when you got to hit them with the cross. Like, that real adaptation is the thing that like is kind of missing. And like when we'll watch this from Dylan Brooks, like Dylan Brooks is not the most physically gifted player in the NBA, but every time you watch him, he is manipulating space with his offhand to a ridiculous degree.
Yeah. I tell you a funny story. I was working with Nancy Lieberman, the Hall of Fame basketball player. One day we're shooting around, and she's like, "Let's play ones." So I'm like, "Okay," but I'm thinking like, this is a 60-year-old woman. I'm not going to. I know she's a Hall of Famer. I know her resume, but it's still a woman. When I say she knew how to create space by swinging these elbows, and she was like, I'm a woman. I grew up playing in New York City, and I had to know how to create space. So I played against guys, and her thing was nobody wants to get hit in the face with an elbow. Your natural reaction is to move out the way, and that's how she was able to create space. But again, it all comes from playing bigger, stronger men that she had to learn little subtle ways to be able to get her shot.
Gotta find a way. And that's some of the stuff with Springer that I'm really excited to see how he grafts on. Like just watching this hand placement, just watching the extension out, a little shove, lean back the other way. Like at times I feel like he's rushing to make decisions. He's just trying to get to the next play. He's just trying to do the right thing. And instead of just being like, okay, I got this dude in jail. Like this dude is totally screwed if I can just use my strength against him, playing slower. Because like he has skills that will keep him on the floor. So here we have him in a weak side position. They're going to run this slot pick and roll going towards the baseline, and you're going to see that he can cover a huge amount of distance and then instantly be on balance. And then if you try to bang with him, I mean this is Herb Jones, you're not going to get anything, and he's able to just stick his arm up. Like this is not a good shot. Like it will not grade out on the plus minus afterwards as like this is a solid possession. It's because Springer made a difficult rotation, was on balance, and then put the physical tools to work.
Look at the arms, yeah.
It's just like, what did you think was going to happen here? Like, this is a huge win. Like this as a defense, this is a huge win if you can get something like that. And like we see a lot of guys with his sort of physical profile, low center of gravity. He's not as explosive as Caruso, but just the ability to sit down. And if you can sit down and be strong while sitting down, you can hurt a lot of skinnier ball handlers. Like that's how Caruso's really like bloomed as a defender, is realizing they're like, oh, my legs are stronger than these others. And so it doesn't matter.
Street trunks.
Yep. And like here we're gonna say Jay Crowder rotate, and he's just he knows he can hold this spot. If Giannis crosses over, he's holding this spot, and if Giannis keeps going, he's pushing him toward Ho. Like you're not going to be able to shut down Giannis. That's just not how life works. But you can push him a direction, and that's going to be so essential for Springer if he is able to play up. He's able to get value playing against bigger creators and forcing options out of the way. Like just saying, okay, I'm able to push him towards help. Like that's an extremely valuable NBA defender.
Yeah.
Here we get some down screen. They love this this guard rub. Like it's usually like, say here we'll get a Springer will set a screen and then pop, and they'll swing the ball around, and then they'll run like it's sort of a guard interchange, but it's a guard screen on the second action, and like this is their best way of creating space. The problem is like the top side looks great. Just watch the bottom side and let me know what is the best option here, because we have a player out of bounds, we have another player on the block, and then one in the slot and one at the top of the key. Like this is a tough situation.
Yeah, and I think it comes to just reading the second level of defense. Like it seemed like on this particular possession, he was just so focused on getting by the man that is guarding him.
And I think different than a lot of other like really strong guys, he doesn't have a good sense of like when to bail. He doesn't retreat out of dribbles as much, and just to be like, okay, this is not going to work. It's very like pedal to the metal. I'm going one direction. Like you see that the defense is lined up and you have nowhere to put this.
Yeah.
Like at that point, you got to bail and be like, all right, so listen. We go around the world to a high-low. We have, this double stagger for Vescovi, who's generally the best spacing they have. Like, Eve will shoot, but Eve's generally not getting respected. And so the read that he's going to be making is on that weak side. Able to shift a little bit, but again, we go back to a 16-footer. Like, where is the easy offense? Am I being too hard on this particular situation? Am I being too hard on his ability to orchestrate these types of things? Because it seems like this was a possession that could have had easier offense, and then it just kind of didn't.
Yeah. No, I don't think you're being too hard. I think it is a legit concern of, like you said, how he gets easy points, and I mean, he doesn't have the blow to just be able to get by every defender. So he has to have some craft and some creativity to be able to get easy baskets and for himself. Like on the play that you just had, Matt. This was when I watched the film. It was like, to me, it should have been an easy read to the corner.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that I think he can have easy looks. It's just a matter of developing his handle and developing his movement skills. Because there's no reason that a dude this strong can't get by people.
Do you think when he shoots the pull up that he's not 100% balanced on his pull up jumper?
Yeah, I do. I 100% do. I have a section. When he takes his first jumper, I have the full jumper section. But I think that he double clutches his pull up in a way that he doesn't on his regular jumper. And a thing that Tennessee engenders more than anything else is spin moves. Their spacing, the way that they like Villanova post ups, it engenders spin moves. And Springer's spin move, this should instantly be a go. We have two weak side defenders clinging, and then the low defender does not have a foot in the paint. If you are a guard who believes themselves to be a guy who lives in the paint, this is as big of a runway as you'll get. He attacks what I would say is the wrong side, and when he spins, he does not turn his head. So he is allowing himself to come out of the spin move blind. Because the first thing that, at least I was always taught, was the second you start spin move, the head needs to whip around. The second thing is that when he does spin, his foot is not pointing to the rim. You go where your toes go, so he goes out. And so instead of having potentially a layup or driving into that help defender where you can kick out to Eve, he's floating into a 14-footer. That's somewhat off balance, but it goes.
Do you think he can make that live dribble left-hand pass? Do you think in his bag right now?
No, because I think that he throws everything from the middle of his body. I think in two plays, we have the perfect example of his live dribble passing comfortability. I think he can do it. I don't think he's comfortable doing one-hand passing at this current moment.
See, I'm left-handed, so when I look at that particular play, it looks like an easy play. Not saying that I could make that play, but if I were in that situation playing pickup, that's an easy pass for me because I'm left-handed.
Yeah.
But if you're on the other side, I cannot make that play because I cannot make a right-hand pass.
Yeah, I mean, his bigger issue is the fact that he's just so comfortable within his frame as a passer. Most of his passes come from either chest or midline from the chest, even if it's a bounce pass, or overhead. And so for him, this pass out of a spin move is maybe one of his hardest passes because you can't throw a chest pass out of a spin. And if you're throwing an overhead pass, you're doing that fading, really difficult Sharif Cooper lob thing, which only Sharif can do in this class.
Yeah.
So he's putting himself by the technique, but also by his alignment, putting himself in a harder situation than he needs to be. Again, you can say Tennessee's context, but there are ways of making your life easier. So here's OG, and my favorite thing in this class is saying that Springer sort of functions like a guard size OG. And when you see they're not the same player, but it's the same function of being you're stronger. You don't need to be a scorer, but you have to have the ability to find offense. When you see OG spin, head is turning before the feet. He's looking for what's happening next, and the foot is going towards the rim. You create the space, then you close it down so that Robert Williams can't walk him away from the rim. So this allows him to finish extended versus finishing into a floater.
Yeah. That's interesting. You made a comparison about their body types. I first saw OG work out here in Dallas with Tyler Relf.
Shout out to Tyler.
Yeah, Tyler's my guy. I saw them work out. I want to say it was after his freshman year, and he was coming off an injury. And when you watch him work out, it's like on one hand, he has a strong frame, a strong lower frame, and sometimes he doesn't look athletic, and then you see the plays where you're like, whoa, this is this is a high athlete.
Yeah, and I mean, this is the alternate side of that play. Like compare what we just saw with OG, where his head spins around, where like if there was a defender, because I mean, like this was a thing OG had when he was, especially that freshman year. But like you could send when OG made a move, you could send help when he wasn't looking.
Yeah.
And again, there is no way that he saw this. There's no way he saw this defender sagging down, or when he did, is right now.
Yeah.
So that's the window he's throwing through, and that's got to be what, right-handed, probably
type creative, confident passer.
But if you don't, if that's not your specialty, what's your as a guard, your responsibility is to put yourself into a situation where you never have to show what you can't do.
Yeah,
and that's the challenge with it. The mixture of his context and his contents put him in a situation where it was very clear what he could and couldn't do. This is the pass. Okay, so this should just be nice and easy, right hand, fire it through. It's a small window. You got a couple dribbling way outside of his body. How did he throw this ball late? And the answer is that he brings it in. On every one of these passes, when he's up to full speed, he doesn't throw it with one. He brings it to the middle of his body and then pushes out from there. And so your question about asking, throwing these one-handed skip passes is like, I don't know if he has the upper body flexibility, not just to finish, but to throw some of these passes and to, getting his spine more more flexible, getting his shoulders more flexible is going to be imperative because like it's limiting some of the stuff that he can do. Like, because this is it's a strange looking motion. I mean, you said it with OG. Like sometimes OG looked like he wasn't athletic, and like this is that looks like a guard who's not athletic, who doesn't have the proprioception to be like, oh, this is coming out, boom. Just a pass up. Gets it back. Again, look at this help. How many NBA guards, like ones or twos, see this and don't just immediately attack the basket?
Yeah.
A small handful. Everybody else is just like free money. I mean, Eve is doing a tie seal. Then brings it back, loses the handle, attacks. Where's the finish? It's again in the middle, in his center mass above his head. And because it's in center mass, you have help that's able to go over top. I mean, Alabama has a whole bunch of athletic dudes, and it gets punched. So I mean, this is I think if you were a Springer skeptic, this would be the play that I think that they would pull out of this game. The hesitancy, some of the handle difficulties, the indecisiveness, and then the difficulty finding a craft finish where I think one could have been available.
Yeah, I agree.
What are you thinking for this finish? I mean, he goes up, he kind of has a window.
I mean, for me, because I'm a left-hander and I'm thinking like a left-handed person, that's an easy attack.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe a left hand, left foot finish.
Okay. So I see where you're going. For me, I'm just not going to expect him to go off one because that's not in his bag right now.
Yeah.
So the thing that jumped out to me is that I kind of just wanted to note how easy it is for other 2-foot finishers to extend out. Because to me, this is a left-hand finish. It's just a left-hand finish at the full extreme. So here we got a pretty tilted left-hand finish, right? And we have, a bigger player under the rim. I think that's Miles Bridges, who's going to, jump 15 feet in the air. And so Lowry gets it as far away from his body as possible.
Yeah.
And uses the rim to shield that defense. The guy, this is almost exactly the situation that Springer was in, and uses the rim to shield the block. Because again, if the defender touches the net, basket counts. So I think that getting that upper body flexibility is going to open the finishing pathways for a guy who had statistically plus finishing, even though the tape has some concerns.
Yeah.
Because I mean, to me, this is like if you were to say what's the best finish package you would like for this dude. I'm like, if he could have anything close to the flexibility Kyle Lowry has in there, I mean, and then the ultimate version of this is Beal. Beal is you get that plus you get the explosiveness, and every time Beal jumps, he has so much core stability. He has so much flexibility that if you hit him in air, doesn't matter where his shoulders go, doesn't matter where the ball, doesn't matter where the ball goes. He will find a way to get that ball to the rim and beyond.
Yeah. And that's the funny thing you mentioned it. And this conversation is great because I haven't really had anyone that breaks down every little detail like the way you break it down. The only time I've been able to have these conversations, and I'm not nowhere near on your level as far as breaking it down, is when I actually talk to NBA players and I ask questions like, how does this person get this off? And they all have different answers that are similar to what you're saying. So one question I once asked somebody was Tony Parker. And they said, man, his core is so strong that he can take any bump and still finish. And I mean, you just look at this Bill play, you talk about his core. Wow.
Just little boy's Trez. Like, might as well be a teddy bear.
Yeah. Like, and so a lot of times we think strength is about how strong a guy's arms look or how stocky he is. And one of the things that my friend said about the Spurs guards, he said that Ginobili and Parker had the strongest cores in the league. And that's why they were able to just, run through any type of contact. And one of the comments he said was, Tony Parker used to challenge Shaq at the rim. And like, how many guards did that?
It's one of those things that that's a really you don't notice it until you try it, or you see somebody who doesn't have those same athletics gifts try it, and it looks nothing the same. You're like, well, hang on now, I did the move exactly like I was supposed to. Like, I mean, I'm tall and skinny, so I thought I could get away with some of those Ginobili finishes, and man, that spin off too did not work for me like it did for him, and I was very curious how that was possible. Here we get a nice little rip. He's good at leading people one direction to rip them on the second side, and then just another mid-body finish. I think he's on Herb for this one, and this is about as good of defensive positioning as you're going to find. Pushes him baseline, rides him through the entire, all the way down to the baseline, establishes the position, and is able to close out to the point that he has a full hand in front of the face. So does not sacrifice the footwork until the exact point the ball is released. A lot of guys get to that first move, they flip their hips, they approach giving up middle that second time, they give up a layup, they come out of the game, they're like, what do you mean I did what I was supposed to? Like this point right there, almost every young guard flips their hips. Yeah. And they give up that either a hezzy or an in and out right there.
That's a great defensive possession. Even though he made the shot, that is a great possession.
I don't know if you can ask for like a better defensive possession. All right, now we get the jumper. So the jumper is it's not busted. Like, I feel like that's the thing that people bring to my doorstep a lot, because I've been really high on Springer for a long time. It's like, well, I don't get the jumper thing. To me, it just looks really segmented. So the feet are different distances quite often. So sometimes they'll be really close, sometimes they'll be far away. He's a little bit of a turn shooter, as we can see here. Hips turn, shoulders turn, which I like. But as you can see, he shoots him a little bit from the left side of his face, and with a little bit of like tilt, so his right shoulder is a little bit higher than his left shoulder. And we will see how this has looked both in this game and a little bit historically, because the good thing about pre-draft workouts is they tape them now, so we get to see a little bit of how it looks. The thing is that like he takes a step back. He's passed up 3 wide open jumpers, and this is the one.
Yeah.
That's the thing where it's like it would be one thing if he only took like super wide open jumpers like early Kyle Anderson. And the other thing that jumps out about his form is that he kind of doesn't dip. So Black is I would say like most players, or what you consider textbook form, where it goes down, then it goes up, but it's close to the body. He kind of has like a Josh Jackson thing. It's not as bad as Josh Jackson, because like sometimes it goes down, but Josh Jackson used to, instead of like because he was told not to dip, used to bring the ball out to generate out and then back in to generate power like a slingshot. And most times off the dribble, it's a dip. When you see him shoot off the dribble, it goes straight down and straight up. But when he's catch and shoot, often it goes out. And that is a major difference that I noticed. And also I think that's something that people at his pro day noticed, because there was no straight on shots of his jumper. There was only one time that they allowed a straight on shot, and it was for half a second. I got footage of that. But every other thing is from the side, where you wouldn't kind of see how the the dip works. But as we can see, like the hand placement is good. The back half of the jumper looks great. Like, the release is high, everything looks good. This is the only thing we have from straight on. So this is from his pro day. We can see the legs are a little bit, they're still a little bit close. We have a bit of still a bit of shoulder tilt. He's releasing the ball from the middle of his face. The elbow is out, and the shooting bed, which is like where your hand goes on the shot, a little bit underneath. So like it's not square still, but we have good things that are generally happening with the jumper. The thing that I just wanted to see is like this is fine. This is a workable NBA jumper. It has to go up. Like you have to shoot these. That was the only time they showed a head-on shot from his pro day of like the 4-minute video that they released. Otherwise, when you watch it, like it looks solid. You can see he's shooting a little bit from there, from the other side of his head, but it's smoother. Aside from the little dip action.
It still looks like it's out a little bit,
Yep.
and you have to wonder like a long arm defender can alter it at a distance.
See, for me, I would love it if a long arm defender altered it, because that would mean he was shooting. For me, the bigger concern is the contest in his head. The contest where he's like, I shouldn't shoot this because the guy's too close.
Yeah.
It would be if he had a bunch of block jumpers as a rookie, I would think that was a positive development sign, because that means he's taking enough contested shots and not worrying about the contest. Because like you can always tell somebody like, all right, we can turn it down. I think the much harder thing is to tell people to shoot more than shoot less.
Isaac Okoro.
Yeah. Franz Wagner.
Yeah.
It's a thing that people assume, but it's not always easy to get through. So here we have.
That was one of the reasons why I had some comparisons to Frank. I saw Frank out almost every day 2 summers ago here in Dallas, and that was one of the things, was to make sure that he's confident in his shot, as opposed to, he only wanted to shoot if it was a very good shot. Anything that was contested or close to being contested, it was a swing, which can put your teammates in a bad situation late in the shot clock. It's kind of like you're throwing them a bomb.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And the other thing is that my issue with the thinking of I only want to take great shots is it's an admission that you shooting the ball is not a good idea. Like that is, I think, the thing that people can miss at times is they're like, well, we only take great shots. It's like, well, if you ask good shooters, what's a great shot? And the answer is me shooting. Like, it doesn't matter how contested it is. Like, if you ask J.R. Smith, what's a good shot? He's like, the one I take.
Yeah.
Because that's the mentality you have to be an NBA shooter. And so I think there is a disconnect from the idea of like, I want great shots and the mentality it requires to be that level of shooter, regardless of the percentage.
Yeah. I mean, you have to be an irrational confidence guy to be a good scorer.
Yeah.
A great scorer, I should say.
Yeah. Again, as I went to, like a NBA coaches camp when I was a kid. I forget which coach it was. And they had players, I grew up in the Bay Area. And one of the players was like 13 years old. And we were like, oh, what's it like to, like, what's it like when you miss a whole bunch of shots? How do you get out of shooting funk? He's like, oh, the next one's going in every time. I don't care if I missed the last 5,000. The next one is going in. You're like, what if I missed the 5,000 in first? It's like the 5,000 second one's going in.
And do you think, in your opinion, do you think that is something that can be taught, or do you think that's something that some guys are just born with?
I think some guys are born with it, but I will say that I think it's a thing that can be instilled in people if the people around them believe it, or you believe your job is threatened. I think that you can put the fear of God in people. If you're like, hey, look, if you don't shoot open threes, you might not make the league. Like, dude suddenly will start shooting. I'll rewind this. But I think broadly, you need a group of people to sit them down and be like, look, we will not pull you if you shoot. I will pull you if you do not shoot.
Yeah.
And there has to be an institutional investment to get that voice in their head that says like, oh, if I miss, I'm going to get pulled, which is usually what it is. Or like, if I miss, we're going to lose. It's like, you just have to get a coach. Like, I think like Don Nelson is somebody that I've looked up to because it's just like, he's like, Don Nelson and D'Antoni, like the reason why a lot of players like them, he's like, yo, you wouldn't be on my team if I wouldn't let you shoot. I just wouldn't play you. So if you pass up a shot, like we're going to have issues. I'll find somebody else to shoot it. Do you want to play? Just shoot. You're like, okay, that's a very easy binary. There's no gray area here.
Yeah.
So
I look at the difference D'Antoni made in Boris Diaw's career.
yeah, like
Just
and it
shoot
doesn't
it.
work for everybody. Like there are dudes
Yep.
who it does not work for. But if everything worked for everybody, we'd have we'd be doing mathematics, not basketball.
Yeah.
So here we get Springer, and we get that off ball defense that I really like. It's a pick and roll. He's in a high leverage situation. He two hand digs down, and then is able to. They call a foul because it's college, but he's able to be ready and positioned to recover if the ball is dug out. So here we get a beautiful Alabama play call, which is like a pin down into that flows easily into pick and roll, and Springer is able to dig with two, which in the NBA will not be called almost ever.
And it was a effort play.
Yeah. And we see Okogie do the same thing. Okogie times this perfectly. So like Donovan Mitchell does a spin move just as he sees the dig, Okogie's there. He waits until the exact moment the ball gets shown. So there's basically no hope for Donovan. And it reaches with two. Again, in the NBA, if you reach with two, it's almost never a foul. And a lot of young guys want to go with one and get it clean, but that downward motion doesn't always fly. And if you're stronger, it's like, oh, I can just take the ball from somebody. It's a high effort thing. It's also a thing that shows that you understand like when you can gamble and when you can't for these digs, and that you're able to, if you miss, you can just recover. If you're in high school basketball, this also never gets called a foul ever. I can't recommend this enough to high school players. Like, do not dig with one. If you dig with two, especially if you're like a star, if you want to save yourself out of foul trouble, free money. So here we're going to get one of Tennessee's go-to options for Keon and for Springer was this like pin down series where they would have them come off curls. Sometimes it worked fantastically. Other times it led to a factory of 16-footers. So here we have a catch that he doesn't run the guy off particularly well. Doesn't force a decision. He's not a guy currently who will like flare out a screen. So he's not going to plant and like reverse course. He usually just either sprints off the screen or jogs off of it. I think they were showing Fulkerson's head injury. I didn't want to show that to people. That's why there's a weird camera jump in here. It's on the split screen. So here we see this catch. Defense is loaded up. You kind of have no options. Keon's not getting respected as a shooter, driving into three people. This is a bone on bone possession. Like there's not real solutions. And sure, he takes an okay shot, but the bigger issue is like how are you going to prevent that in the league? Springer's like a 1.2 points per possession in transition, which is much better than how Keon was doing. I think Keon had more on ball possessions, which is a huge factor in driving his possessions down. As a 2-foot finisher in traffic or in transition, he runs into some issues.
Yeah. Because and the angle was there for, again, I'm left-handed, so it looks like an easy, maybe the angle wasn't as good as I thought it was, but it does look like he had a 1-foot finish.
Mm-hmm. Again, he almost never jumps off one. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Like I would, if I were a team working out Springer, I would say, okay, here's our, we bring in two other dudes or whatever, do some like 1-on-2 finishing drills. If you can only shoot off 1 foot. All these layups are off one. And just to see, how he deals with that instability. To me, what this looks like is that this has to be, if you're going to go off two, again, I'm sticking with the realm of what I know to be true, is that he's a 2-foot finisher. This has to be a turn finish. He has to position his shoulders, instead of being square, to turn his shoulders to carve out a little more space. And so here we're going to see THT do roughly the same thing. He's going to do it off one, but you'll see the idea. We get a low rip through. Again, Springer's gathers are not fantastic. I think he can pick up even more fouls just by becoming a better back gather guy and being less resilient on or reliant on pro hops. Here we can see THT tilts his shoulders, tilts his hips, creates another 3 feet of space, and then extends out. If Springer had done the same thing, tilted his shoulders, the rim protects him, and the help over the top wouldn't have punched it. Yeah. So this is another example of like, we think of guys who have 2 feet as like not having a great bag, because it does limit things. Like you do have about 5 or 6 general finishes, but there are many guys who do finish either off two or in a power dynamic who do have, when they have this, again, THT is very flexible for a dude who's as big as he is, in the chest and, built like Harden, but he still is all in the shoulders. He's all.
One of the guys that I work with is Kay Felder. Kay is tight and compact, not really I mean, he's a great athlete, just great. I think one of his records at the combine was broken, but he's a 2 foot jumper. But one of the things that he works on is finishes from all angles, up and unders, high above the square finishes, reverse finishes. And I think that has helped him because he has a lot of creativity around the rim. He doesn't want to jump off one because he's small and he says that he can't protect himself jumping off one. So he's mastered 2 foot finishes with creativity.
Yeah. I mean, and the thing is you don't necessarily have to be a great athlete. Like Brogdon has really learned how to, I mean, this is almost the exact same angle, right? Yeah. This is almost the exact same angle versus a better athlete. Yeah. And who he tricks into not contesting the shot.
Yeah.
By, again, turning his shoulders and creating an alternate angle out of, I would say, a difficult angle, but out of 2 feet. But it requires that core flexibility, that core stability, and playing outside of your body.
Isaiah Thomas was great at that. I remember watching film of that year. He averaged 28 a game, and just how good he was at finishing and angles and using his feet or ball movement, fake passes to create that advantage. But that comes with creativity, and Isaiah is a great creative scorer.
Yeah, I mean, some people would say creativity, some people would say freedom, and that's I'm interested in seeing how this goes because I think that some people will look at this tape and say like, well, if Springer were allowed to do more, he'd have more. I don't think that's true.
No, I think this is all.
I think it's just learning how to use the tools that he has more positively. Like, I mean, but a guy who can do these kind of rotations, who has a feel and a defensive feel for angles and just a motor like this, does he's going to get play and be useful as a rookie just for those parts.
Yeah.
Here we get this is why I asked earlier about you'd think he can get by people. His initial step is often sideways. He doesn't make use of his first step. He loves this between the legs as a first step. And it just seems very negative to me. I would like him to smooth that out and instead turn that into a jab or a rocker step. This first step right there, that doesn't do anything for me personally. I don't think he has the kind of wiggle that helps him there.
Yeah.
But he's able of achieving really good shin angles. He has the athleticism. It's just some of his moves feel like they were taught for somebody else's body type. I have moves that I can't do because I'm tall and skinny. But they work really well for other people. But when I try to do them, they do not fly. And so I had to learn what worked for me. When you're, a taller ball handler, there's some stuff that if you do against 5'8", 5'9", 5'10" guards, they will eat you alive.
Yeah.
And there's other stuff that you're like, all right, so that's just that can't be in my bag right now. Here we got to kick out. We get a catch, feet are close together, limits the power generation, and because of that, we get another one of these arm outs. To me, this is pretty fixable. I'm not concerned about how every one of the shots looks pretty good. He doesn't have super wild misses. Some of the really heavy off the dribble stuff where he's gets handed grenades can be tough.
Yeah. But it seems when he does miss off the dribble, it's short.
Yeah.
And it's he fades back a little bit.
He also double clutches, and you can see the legs kick out. And there is some power. It's not power generation because he's strong enough. To me, it's energy optimization, where it's just the timing is not perfectly aligned. So just like an engine when you had shop class. I don't know if people still have shop class. When you don't have it tuned right, it just starts making weird noises and not doing anything. And you just have to get everything aligned, and then it doesn't matter how powerful the engine it is, it'll really hit. Here we get another one of those curls, and these are the situations where the idea of creativity and creativity within a difficult situation. Here he gets 3 on he runs this guy off a screen, big stride for a catch. He gets 4 people in the paint. And instead of holding all 4 hostage, he just goes up strong. And I would love to see him, either hold for a second or retreat out and see who comes with him. There's just times where I want to see more of him threatening a defense, but he's going to need to shoot to get the kind of coverages and plays we want. So on your guys' view, you cannot see who's over in this left corner. And you also can't see their defender because this person has enough gravity that people have to stick them close.
Yeah.
And they're, a little bit bigger than Springer, but built generally the same sort of way. And they're just going to run a quick action to beat this coverage. It's a Maggette cut. Easy done. In college, teams just pack the paint against Springer. Tennessee allowed with their lineup combinations and things like that for this stuff to happen. And I think that the way that I would want Springer to be used is enough that he can get this sort of coverage that you can use him on these Maggette cuts. You can use him as a cutter, as a guy who can get 2-foot finishes like through traffic or through like light traffic if it's one guy or so a pair of help side and giving him a runway. But that's going to come down to how much volume he gets. Because like I can see him doing this. It's just a matter of will the defense give you that coverage?
Yep.
Like here we have Taylor Horton Tucker. They run this. It's like a 1-4 high set. Real Hoosier stuff. But for whatever reason, Taylor Horton Tucker gets stuck to like super close, and it's just a hard cut, and then a big bodied seal, and then again 2-foot extension finish. Like these are options that are available for players with the same general archetypes, but you have to get these coverages so that you can hold position and get your Sean Alexander on and make sure nobody gets to the place you want to get to. Do you think that there's any chance that like he will eventually get to real gravity so he can be used as a cutter, against more spaced out floors?
Well, I mean, you look at Horton Tucker; he's just not a gravity guy.
Yeah, but people are so worried about giving him a head of steam.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good point. I do think, well, one, in order for him to get to that point, he has to become a more confident shooter. And that's the big thing, because I feel like that he's gonna pass up open looks. I think he can make them. It's just
I mean, like, and gravity has nothing to do with percentages. Like I've talked about this a lot. Like Devin Booker is a dramatically worse shooter by percentage than Shai Gilgeous-Alexander if you take their careers concurrently. But Shai doesn't get closeouts because people aren't mentally, they don't think of him as a shooter, and they're like, look, we can't let him get into the paint. Booker is thought of as a shooter, so he gets nuts closeouts. And if you are hesitating, people assume you're not a shooter, and that changes the coverages. So the perception of being hesitant, the perception of not being a dude who's just salivating for open threes, will change how defense is covered.
Yeah.
Like how many times have we seen offenses break when 3 and D guys are shooting wings, go on a cold streak and start passing up looks, and then the offense doesn't work because now they can just sit in the paint. And it's like, well, nothing changed. It's just the defense's mentality shifted, and getting that mentality shift out of Springer is going to be so important. In the second half of this game, they switch him on to JQ, and you get to start to see him in what I would say is maybe my favorite role of his. Like, it's nice to see he can guard bigger wings, but watching him work against like ones at point of attack, again, I don't think he's going to get all of his reps there, but his technique and his ability to navigate like screen coverages and to get back to like ideal position. Again, we talked about bumping you off spots. Like JQ for the almost all of this game got 2 feet in the paint, created rotations, and the second half they put Springer on him, and that's 1 foot going way outside of the paint, and then the shot gets blocked. But that's not the end of the possession. Springer stays on him, forces I believe a help. There's a pick and roll they run away from him. He's able to sit, knows the clock, and he gets a good contest. Like this is if you are a Springer optimist defensively, this is the possession you throw at him. Somebody that's capable of navigating screens, communicating options with a big motor, and somebody who understands how to play the angles and being like, oh, there's not enough time for this dude to drive to the middle, pump fake, and kick it back to my guy and him get a 3 off. Like knowing that you have that kind of window. That's really advanced stuff from a teenager.
Yeah. And you said, was this wingspan? Was it +4?
Yeah, I think it's +4.5 if you go. Like I go by without shoes.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's like close to that 6. I think it's 6'8", and he's like 6'3", and 6'3.5" without shoes. So I mean, like it's fine. I think the movement skills and the strength are much more meaningful for him than like a wingspan number. It's not like Moody, where like Moody uses the wingspan in a really specific way. Like Springer's not leveraging his wingspan and needing to leverage his wingspan in the same way.
Yeah.
The thing that drives me nuts is dribble kills, and it's the sign of a guy who's not particularly confident. Like this is a scripted play for Keon to get a post up, and Springer just picks up his dribble. Keon doesn't get open. It's going to be a turnover, but like there's a giant hole in the middle of that defense. JQ was just walking up to deny a point, like the nominal point guard. I think it's Scobie. And this should just be like, okay, like big crossover. I'm going to the middle. Let's get some rotations. Let's play out of that. Ball move, ball move, ball move. Get something moving. And instead, he just can't get off this like scripted play for Keon, which is like well covered, and it results in turnover because of his unwillingness to kind of like freelance for himself.
Yeah.
Another one of these like rub plays, guard to guard rub into a DHO, and I think from the DHO we get some pick and roll. Tennessee runs good stuff. It's just that the lineups don't necessarily create spacing because like gravity exists for the defense, and if they're not worried about you shooting the first one, then they're not gonna pressure it and give you the option for the roll. Again, I think the footwork here is fine. It's just that like where was this the other times at this exact? What separates this read from all the other reads?
Yeah, and it could be a situation where maybe he didn't feel like he got up a shot in a while, and that one he knew this one was going up. But yeah, as far as his aggressiveness as a shooter, is definitely not consistent.
Yeah. DHO with Eve. Ball gets reversed. Like again, we have moments where like the offense looks okay. We get to I would say a pressure point. We have 4 defenders like kind of in the paint. We have this hammer on the strong side. And again, we get like a 16-footer.
Do you think he should have shot it earlier?
I think he should have just been more patient. Like, I don't think this defense is going to, like, if you have this hammer action, they have to respect it. Like, let the hammer action play out. Don't immediately pick up your dribble. I think, like, he made a fine decision. Like, nothing bad is going to happen because you take a 16-footer. But if he had just hesitated a little bit, let that defense play out, maybe the next time they run that play, the hammer's open.
Yeah.
Like, I think that it's a fine result, but the process leaves me a little bit wanting more. Another great JQ possession. Just a beautiful big step to beat the screen, recovers, stabs with one, forces the early pickup. Early pickup kind of kills the possession. Like, this is, I don't think you want him on the fastest of ones, but if he can guard some like 1.25s, yeah. Francis in the chat says he was 6'3" without shoes, with a 6'7" and 3/4 wingspan, so he's a plus 4.75. So yeah, just look at how big this step is. He's going to take that left foot and get above the screen level. In the second half, Tennessee went uphill, so fighting to make sure JQ doesn't get to the screen, and it did present real problems. Like, I like him much more in that like aggressive style of pick and roll coverage. Like, I think that you would sort of want him in what Milwaukee is doing, where you're putting pressure to get into drop, rather than letting people flow into drop, which is sort of like what people generally think of. Because when you do have him like flow down, one, he's not as aggressive, but it does show this thing that like I think is under talked about when it comes to switching, which is the guard's responsibility of switch. I think we have a Milwaukee possession coming up. I might got it, or I might have just misplaced it. Come back to that later. 16-footer. The process here is bad. I like the spacing is not great. Obviously, anytime you have 4 people hanging out in the paint for more than 3 seconds, like something's gone wrong.
Yeah.
But you still have to recognize like this is not.
Can you see how much time was left on the shot clock? I can't tell if it was like.
There is 20.
So yeah, I mean that should have been a retreat.
22, 21. 19. Yep. Like at times it feels like he thinks too quickly, and other times it feels like he thinks too slow. It's just not, there's not a consistent approach on some of these. So here he fights back, he fights over, he gets a good amount of separation on the screen. Like the footwork isn't as good stabbing and recovering as it was for the uphill stuff. You can see he doesn't pick a direction as cleanly, but he does fight to get back. When he fights to get back, it triggers a difficult closeout. I think that there could have been better closeouts. Like, a thing that I'm excited about, this is what I thought I placed it earlier. The thing I'm excited about is like when we talk about drop or switches, an element we under discuss is the guard's ability to fight. So here, like the screen gets snaked and the big is going to get drawn away. And it's going to be Holiday's job to get underneath of the big and box out. And that's something I feel pretty confident in Jaden Springer's ability to do, is to take the guard responsibility, whether it's a switch or a drop that gets snaked, and handle the big responsibility, even if it's only for 1 or 2 seconds, and just give a real fight. He's not going to box out and do all the bead, but like you are going to feel his presence in that action. And that's not true of every guard that plays drop.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Here we get a rip through baseline. Like, this is a better process. Like, I know it's not fantastic, but he at least considers the defense. This is more. If I saw more of this, I would have been a lot happier with this game. I think this game has a lot of good positives offensively, but a lot of real positives offensively. But you can see that he has a moment where he does a half spin on the baseline drive. Again, that first step, I don't love the jabs as much for him, but he gets more out of it. We get a half spin. We're here. He forces the defense to pick between him and Eve. He picks him, kick out goes to Eve. That's good process to me. The reason why I want him to force a little bit more a little bit more holding in his coverages is that whether it's by scheme or by player, the NBA is really good at timing up drivers. So here we're going to see this is Bojan. This is Bogdanovich. I get their names. I get the one that's not. Yeah, Bohan. It's Bojan. It's Bojan. That J trips you up when you got to deal with multiple Spanish players. This is a big FIBA week, so I'm in an international J setting. So Bogdanovich is going to take 2 steps to the rim, right?
Yeah.
And Jared Jackson's just going to be like, "Oh, it's just 2 steps. I'm going to time it up and meet you at the top," because he's mentally figured out that, 2 steps is 2 steps, and he knows exactly when to get there. As long as there's not a dump off, he's going to be able to get to it. He doesn't have to think about anything different because it's a flow right into it. And whether this is a 1-2, whether this is a 2-step, having a clear and present decision. It's like when JV players try to dunk on varsity players. It's like, oh, I know when you're going to be there. I'll just meet you there. I can get higher.
Yeah.
You need to present NBA bigs with some level of indecision. If he looks at Rudy for a second, Jaren probably drops and he gets a free layup or an easier layup. And just that element of indecision or forcing a player to make a decision is going to be essential for him.
And that's what Isaiah was really good at. A situation like that is Isaiah's strong hand as opposed to Bojan's weak hand. Mm-hmm. But Isaiah was really good at right when they split of doing like a simple ball fake. Even Ingles has
yes.
He's the best at the pass fake, because I remember he still does it from time to time, but Ingles was always driving to pass. Mm-hmm. And because, he lacks the burst and the athleticism and vertical pop to really be a finisher at the rim. But it just shows how he took strides this year because of the pass fake, froze defenders just enough to where he was able to get to the rim and become a better finisher.
Yeah, I mean, Joe Ingles' pick and roll highlights are a mainstay of this show. The other thing is that the scheme can do the same thing to you. Brooke gets a block, but the scheme does the same thing. The scheme knows that you're on the same time, and it's able to push you into a walk down that results in this shot. Because you didn't make the scheme think, they got the result they wanted to.
Yeah.
And I think that was a separator for me with Springer, is when he made the scheme and when he made the players think, he got better results, because right now he's not winning easy. So I just wanted to walk through and see if any of this jumped out to you. I want to see if, anything in particular. So pathways to separation or advantages. Anything jump out from the game we saw?
I I think he just needs to be more creative. Mm-hmm. And one of the things you said that kind of stuck out to me was him spending the summer in that LA setting, playing like 4-on-4 and pick up. I think that would help as far as with his creativity.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's offhand violence, and it's taking more risks with how he positions himself, less straightforward and more like, it just didn't feel like he had different responses. It was like, I'm either going to take the pull up or I'm going to drive. Those are the two options. It's just getting into that skill tree of, if he does this, I'm going to do that. If he does that, I might go over here. It seemed like it was his verbs, so to speak, were pretty small. It was shoot, drive. There wasn't a lot of other variance in there. Great body control, poor body variance. I mean, for me, this is the central issue for him as a rookie, which is getting him into a flexibility program, getting him into a level of comfort with 2-foot finishes if 1-foot finishes aren't necessarily going to happen immediately. Some guys it can happen, in one summer. Other guys will take 2 or 3 years to get really comfortable and have a lot of options. I mean, that's a thing that the NBA has broadly been very good at. I talk about it a lot, but like tall, skinny guys getting their flexibility has been really like a strength in the last 10 years. Like Brandon Ingram, I swear to God, might not have been able to touch his like middle shin his rookie year, and now he has like the flexibility to get the really long Euro steps, which are when you've got tight hamstrings are a real difficulty. And he's able to get cleanly now and change direction within them. Does that seem feasible to you within the first couple of years? Again, not assuming like a perfect development decision, but just like if he's drafted into an average strength conditioning program.
Yeah, even then, I think a lot of it is on him in the offseason. Even if he isn't a good team strength and conditioning program, it's up to him to hire the best people that actually know and pay attention to his body so he can develop that. And it's such an underrated aspect behind it. I mean, like you said about Ingram, he's made the changes to help improve his flexibility. But I wanted to mention something on the first one. In this video, it's probably the one game where I did not see him drive to the basket and then, he can't get by the guy and then it turns into a post up, into a
Villanova post up, yeah.
Yeah, I did not see that a lot this game. Usually you see it, maybe 4 or 5 possessions in most games.
Yeah, I was Springer's a really hard one to pick. I try to pick a representative game, and the 4 or 5 conditions I try to think of are versus like presenting an NBA problem. So like NBA athletes, NBA scheme, like something that will be present on their film in the NBA playing and something like that. I want it to be a certain amount of jumpers, which for him, he has some games that I thought were really good, but he didn't take any shots. So like I don't want it to seem like I'm cutting out an important area. And then
I don't think it was more than 7 games where he took double-digit shots.
And he also played like 20 minutes a game. So like there's a lot of issues for me with picking one. And I noticed that about halfway through, I was like, we haven't got any of the the Mark Jackson post ups yet. And we got a spin move, so I feel like we're good because the spin move sort of presents the same. He does the same thing where he doesn't always look on the Mark Jackson post up, and it doesn't always lead to great results either. So our third point is shrink space, strong and shrunk space. To me, this is his best ability is the ability to cover space, and then if he has a big or small against them, he can make your life very difficult. A lot of guys are really good at closing out. They're able to get somebody to put the ball on the deck. And then if that person is patient, they can get whatever they want. Like it requires either if you have to either be like sort of a phantom, which is what like DeJounte Murray and Matisse Thybulle are really good at is you're able to take what you want, but then when you go to shoot, suddenly they appear. Or you have to have the tools to suddenly to make up for being skinny. Like Mikal Bridges is fantastic at that. You'll take space from him and then he'll take it back from you. At some point when you guys are getting vertical. What is a good low volume shooter, or what is low volume good shooting? I mean, this is a question that will continue for eternity. I think that we've kind of come to a point where we know what the issues are with him and laid it out for everyone to have their own read on.
What's interesting is, couldn't you make a case about this with, let's say, a great shooter like Steve Nash?
Yes, yes.
He was a low volume elite shooter, but you wonder, like, man, if he could have gave up a few percentage points, instead of 53, like one year I saw he shot 47% from 3, but it could have been, I don't know, 50, 38, but on more attempts. I wonder how much more dangerous could he have been, because he was an elite shooter that just didn't take a lot of shots.
Yeah, and he's sort of locked in that era where as much as we watch, like I've gone back and watched those games, and like the people are freaking out about taking wide open shots. Like they're like, they just shoot so many threes. I'm like, they passed up 4 threes on this possession. Like I'm like, if you would have dropped Bones Highland in this situation, he would have got 33s up from all of that you allowed him. Be lucky that Steve Nash is not taking these off the dribble in your face when you're going underneath his pick and roll. I mean, it's going to be a thing that I think every NBA team in this draft is going to have to answer with him. And I think there's a couple other guys who have, like Kai Jones is not the exact same thing, but you have to say like how much does 58 college threes mean for Kai Jones, or everyone is going to have different levels of faith in prior data, different levels of faith in the coaches that they've had. Some coaches say, hey, you're not allowed to shoot. Other coaches, you're allowed one per quarter. Other coaches aren't saying anything against the player themselves. So I think this is one that like we've taught the controversy because I don't think either of us have the solution. And the last one is cost benefits of playing up. The maturity stands out to me in terms of not being able to hold defenses accountable, not being able to be covered by three guys and recognize that you're actually winning right now. Like something that like I think Josh Giddey is really good at, and we talked about in the Franz Wagner stream is that like when it takes multiple people to guard you, like you've succeeded. Keep them guarding you because now you get to dictate what happens next. You are now in control. The more pressure they send at you, the more you're in control. And at times, I felt like he succumbed to that control. And you can point to that and say, look, he's 18 years old. He's one of the youngest players in the class. He's dealing with this big usage. Or you can look at that and say, he's one of the youngest players in this class. He's dealing with all this usage. He's also not good at this decision-making process. And everyone's going to land in different spots of that spectrum. I'm probably a little closer to he's not particularly good at this. But I also, my ideal role for him is somebody that doesn't necessarily have to do that. Is somebody who cuts and somebody who it just has to take a bunch of shots. I mean, I would, in my perfect world, D'Antoni coaches him and says like, hey, if you don't shoot a three, like you're now a center. Congratulations. Go work on those lob catches, I guess, my guy. Do you have any? Did this process change how you come down on him in his youth?
A little bit. I mean, I feel like I learned something, and I mean, every time I watch one of your videos, I feel like it's class in session. But yeah, I mean, it was little things that you were able to point out. I mean, I knew he was a good defender, and I know that he has a high upside as a defender. But some of the things that you pointed out about the shrinking space and the two hands, like that's something that I would not have picked up. And especially when you mentioned that doesn't get called for a foul in the NBA. So I was high on him as a defender, but I'm more high on him as a defender based off of this. I still think there's a lot of questions and concerns, which is why the whole Frank Ntilikina thing still stands out to me.
It looms large.
Yeah, how is he going to get easy baskets? And is he going to put his teammates in the best position if he's passing up shots, especially like late in the shot clock?
Yeah, I mean those are essential questions. So I'm gonna grab a bit of water, and we're gonna do a little Q&A. You good to stick around for that?
Yeah, that's
good.
Like
10 minutes, so okay. Joined by Rafael Barlowe, joined by the 2003 NBA draft, playing in the background, Ride to Hell. Our first question is from Francis: do you believe that Springer went to IMG too early in his development?
That's
a great question. So IMG is the powerhouse school in Florida. He went after his sophomore year. I believe he went to the Cannon School in North Carolina, which is a North Carolina private school powerhouse. Shout out Hoop State, obviously. Yes and no. I think that Springer might have gone like a year too early as a primary, but he also played on a AAU team. Like he wasn't one of those guys who played on stacked high school team, like turbo stacked AAU team, where he had the exact same role like Caleb Houston kind of, who weirdly has his most usage for his national team. One of the few guys that's ever really happened to.
And it happens, not here in the States.
Yeah. I just mean like usually like you'll see it for guys who like play for like I would say like third tier countries, but to have that for Canada is really interesting. A very much up and coming, soon to pass America. It's on the list of countries that will eventually take the title from us.
Yeah, Primo didn't. I think he could have played.
So, do you think do you think he should have waited another year? Do you think that another year of super heavy usage rather than being a guy on an extremely good team, like the defense certainly wasn't like his defensive role was very much defined. So, do you think that the offensive alignment bonus would have counteracted the defensive bonus? Like he's an interesting player for that particular question.
I don't know. I mean, that's a good question, and I feel like I'm just kind of torn on. I see both sides of it. If he ends up being a first round pick, which he's projected to be, then is it really was it really the wrong decision?
Yeah.
So that's where I don't know, but I'm actually kind of torn because I still can't think of an answer. Every time I think I have one, my mind changes. I think a lot of it is just him, though. I think that's just his overall makeup, as opposed to the decision. So I just think that's him as a player. He's going to look to do the right things, look to make the smart shots. So he's just gonna have to change his mentality.
Yeah, because like I think that there wasn't like if I were just to think of most players, if you just put his resume down and said like if you are this good, should you leave and when? Like I would say after his sophomore year, like the resume is strong enough. He clearly, if he's looking for another challenge, it's just that decision affected him in a certain way that tempered down his willingness to take responsibility for the opportunities presented him, like to really seize those versus just like plugging in and not asking for more than what the defense is giving you. So I think the answer is still he made the right decision, but I think that it's about how he responded to it versus any wrong decision. Fascinating question. Thank you so much. JVGFO3 asks, what is Springer's ideal role on an NBA team?
That's the question I wanted to ask you.
I want to ask you on this one. What do you think it is?
I think a combo guard that needs to be paired with. I think an ideal situation is he shares a backcourt with someone like James Harden that does all the creativity, that does all the scoring. He can knock down open shots. He can defend the best guard that, and then a guy like Harden can take the weaker defender, or even like someone like Luka Doncic.
I got a name. So I think that we're aligned. I think of him as a connector. So like you get him as like you replicate the De'Aaron Fox, Tyrese Halliburton dynamic. Obviously, Halliburton has different specific strengths and weaknesses, but the idea is that like you don't want him to necessarily have usage, but you want him to have a lot of decisions. Yeah, and you can put him into as a rookie or as a sophomore, put him into specific situations where like we need you to make this choice right now. Like if you are open, you cannot not shoot.
Yeah. I agree. Because, I mean, even with Halliburton was someone that I was not really, really high on in the draft process. But I felt like if he would have been drafted by certain teams, it was going to maximize his skill strength. And luckily, he went to one of those teams. I even thought before Chris Paul was there, I thought Phoenix would have been a good fit for him.
Yep.
So, I think Springer's.
Are you ready for the perfect creator to pair him next to?
I'm listening.
Los Angeles' very own LaMelo Ball.
And I mean, he would be at home. He'd be at home in Charlotte.
And they'd play a brand of basketball that's it's up tempo. So I like to think of like with guys who tend a little more conservative. I want to put them in up tempo spots because it's like we get 100 possessions. Who cares if you kick one of them into the stands? Like it's not that big of a deal. Whereas if you play slow, I think it really it enables sometimes the worst in their decision making, where they want to cherish those possessions, and usually those coaches are a little more wired to be hard asses, and you can get situations where players get academy brain and just want to make the right decision.
Academy brain, that will definitely be added.
I mean, that's what you call it when somebody only does they make the right decision for the shirt. They're not the dude in the shirt. They're just playing as what did I say I was supposed to do?
Oh, I've spent 2 seasons in China, and the whole entire country has that. I mean, that just.
Frank Ntilikina is one of those. So when he doesn't have it, you're like, oh, this is a dude. And then when he plays like he spent every second in the academy.
Yeah.
You get some problems. Okay, Bobby asks, Jaden Springer does not seem like your typical dude for whom hashtag draft Twitter seems way higher than NBA teams and or mainstream draft heads. What gives? If you explain this on stream, I'm sorry, my watching was interrupted. We did not. We did not talk about why he is sort of atypical. Um, I think I have an answer on why he's not as beloved, but I would love to hear yours because I might be too close to the situation.
So the question was, why is he?
No, the question is like he doesn't usually draft Twitter likes guys who are like specifically good at stuff. Like, you know, they love Xavier Tillman. They're guys who are audit like you know, they're guys who are just like, oh yeah, he's good. Like, don't ask too many questions. He's good. Like John Conchar. Basically everybody the Grizzlies have drafted. Brandon Clark. But Springer doesn't really get Springer's not that exactly. But I think a lot of people have, you know, globbed onto him as a potential guy. What do you explain for the people who like how would you explain the hype to somebody who's like, what's going on with this? I don't see it.
Well, I think one, he's helped by Keon Johnson gets all of that hype for him on you know by being on the same team. So I think that kind of helps him out. As far as somebody who says they don't get the hype, I get it because you can say that he's kind of like a boring prospect.
Yep.
He's not someone that you're going to be wowed with highlights or amazing plays of athleticism. Even like on offense, you're not going to see like a JT Thor. You can watch his film and you can say, "Wow, this guy is raw." But then you're going to see a few plays where you're like, "Oh, I see the upside. If he can add this or continue this, then he's great." And I don't think that Springer falls into any category.
Yeah. So my answer is that the reason why the draft why he's not the typical dude is because he's a dude who's 2 years before being that dude. Oftentimes, like the archetypal guy's older, or he's like D'Anthony Melton, who, you know, was really really good as a freshman. Like he was in the Pac-12. Usually those guys get caught on too late, and Springer was one of those guys who it's like, oh, he could be one of those guys. He does so much little stuff right, but he's still, you know, he's not processing at that high level yet. And so I think that he's actually he's like a high potential draft Twitter guy, where he's like, oh, he has a really good chance of turning into one of those dudes who does all the right things, and you're like, hey, I don't care what, you know, the box score says. Like, he was awesome in this game.
Yeah.
So that's my personal explanation.
I like it.
Okay. Max Goodlove asks, how realistic is it for Springer to become a comfortable 1 foot jumper, and what skills would that open up for him, and how him to utilize that he can't now? Mr. Trainer, Mr. You know, experience with the NBA guys, enlighten us with this topic.
Well, Donovan Mitchell did it. He's
he did
the
it
first
3 months.
What's that?
He did that like 3 months.
And yeah, Donovan Mitchell has another level of athleticism and burst and speed, but it can be done. If Donovan Mitchell can do it over the course of a summer, then maybe Springer can develop it in a year or so. So I think there's a possibility. But I think, like, I don't know. I would love to hear how Donovan Mitchell did it. I don't know if it was during the summer or if it was when he got to Utah with I think Johnny Bryant, the guy that's with the Knicks now. I'd have to ask and see where did it start, if Utah identified it. But I do think it's possible. I definitely do think it's possible.
And what would becoming a 1 foot jumper open up for him?
I mean, I just think that window. It's such a small window in the NBA to finish. And for him, if he's not going to be like super crafty with the ball, then just that split second. Because I mean, you look at a guy like Gobert. If you're driving and Rudy's there and he knows you're a 2 foot leaper, he's timing it and he's sending it to the third row. Or you end up not wanting to shoot it and you're throwing like this crazy pass on the baseline that gets deflected out of bounds. So I think it would open up him as a driver, and it allow him to finish quicker.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, my answer is that like it's realistic, but I wouldn't say that it's likely, because like the guys who have done it or have been like there haven't usually it takes guys so much longer just because it's a whole new movement style. And like the expectation that he could get it in like a year or two is pretty difficult just because like we've basically had one dude who did that.
Yeah.
And I think that if you asked, that probably started a year before, 2 years before, 3 years before, and it slowly happened, and then it happened all at once.
Yeah.
What it opens up for him is options. He's able to attack with inverted euros. He's able to, present different fronts to a defense, and they can then be accountable to making reads. That ability to offer different problems for a defense to solve versus like, okay, he's either going to go up off two or he's going to, give me a little dump off as soon as he leaves his feet. It presents an option that it presents more indecisiveness to a defense and makes them ask more questions. And the goal for any offensive player is to continue to ask a defense questions that it has options to answer, but it never can key in on one specific thing.
And if he doesn't add it, then he's going to have to really, really develop some creativity, acrobatic finishes around the rim, the Joe Ingles fake pass, something that's just going to throw the defense off, even if it's just looking guys off with his eyes. He's going to have to be really good at those things if he's going to continue to be a 2-foot leaper.
Yeah. Francis asks, with Springer's flexibilities, do you think going to the Get Swole machine in the Tennessee weight room to add on what was a good strength foundation was possibly counterintuitive?
That's a question I do not know the answer to.
I mean, you can speak generally. I mean, we don't have any counterfactuals.
I don't know. I mean, you can probably answer it better than I can. Do you think that he looked more flexible in high school?
Not really.
Yeah.
I think that his flexibility, I think that it is difficult to ask a college program to offer professional solutions and with an eye towards professional gains. Like, one, I think that his flexibility issues are things that like will take time to solve. Like flexibility generally takes a little bit of work. It's not just 2 months and then you come out different. It's probably going to be a number of years to get him to a really full movement style if it does happen. And the second thing is like it probably helped him to get stronger. Like there was value in that, and they probably were working on his flexibility. It's just that like you can't ask them to be like, hey, we're going to work exclusively on your flexibility. You're not working out with the team, which is like obviously one of the biggest points about developing team culture and spending time together, and just like have him go to the side and just do hamstring and arm mobility routines. Like that's just not going to happen. So I think that broadly, I don't expect college teams to offer solutions to problems for 5 and 7 year vets. It's just that like if he wanted to do that, he probably shouldn't have gone to college and spent a year doing flexibility stuff, and then he would have had a different set of questions, and he probably isn't the style of prospect. Like the guys who can take years off are like scorer types where it's like they're going to do a thing. There's no worries. It's hard to showcase your defensive rotations in a workout. Like if that's the thing that like I think that Jaden Springer's rotations will like make him pretty quickly playable in the playoffs.
Yeah.
You cannot. It is so hard to set up a workout that proves that point if you haven't played basketball in a year. So I think there's a lot of layers there. It is difficult. Okay. Let's just get out on a couple of quick general questions on the draft. Okay. Do you have any Josh Primo thoughts? Speaking of young players.
Yeah, I think that Primo definitely has upside as a shooter. I definitely think that he's a better shooter than what his percentages were. But there's also an upside as maybe a shot creator, maybe someone that can make plays for others out of pick and roll. I feel like he looks a lot younger than Springer, even though I know they're like around the same age. He seems like he has more upside than Springer.
Yeah, I mean, he has more on-ball juice, which I think a lot of people will be like, that's potential. But I also don't like on-ball juice. Also requires people to trust you, and I don't know if he ever gets to that level of like allowing enough decision making to make the handle and size intersection and shooting intersection like really interesting. I think he's always going to be like a tertiary or less on offense. So I think that a lot of the juice is like it's the thing that's building his hype, but it's also like I don't think that's ever going to be his role, or at least not on his first or second contracts. I've never really. I thought he needed either another year or he was a pre-draft guy who you were stashing in the G League. Um, but broadly, I like him. I think that if he's not the guy I would get that I thought would get the young guy bump, but it is. I always appreciate it when the young guys get second looks. When people try to reconsider their or recontextualize their season.
Well,
Um,
he's to me, he seems like he's been getting it for a while. Like I remember at the under 18s 2 summers ago, and he had like a big tournament. Then he made the team, and he just showed a little bit of flashes.
mhm.
And they were like, "Oh, he's only 16 years old." So then it's like, "Oh man, Josh Primo's the next good thing, the next great thing out of Canada." And then it's literally almost the same this season. Got off to somewhat of a slow start, showed some flashes, and then now he's riding that wave into possibly being a first round pick. So
Yeah,
I
I mean,
think,
I like the idea of drafting guys who like are a year away in the first round just to have that extra, contract flexibility. Like I don't mind him being a first rounder. Mike, I've never really seen like he's never been a guy that's popped for me. And I've
mhm.
because my viewings to him have always been flashes. I'm like, yeah, but I've seen flashes from him before, and I'm like, but I want to see like a stretch. I want to see
Yeah.
6 or 7 games, and like I don't care what age group it is. I've just never seen him. You know, I've never really seen that consistency. So for me, he's a guy who like I struggle to super get. Like Thor, I understand it. Like I with Rocco, I understand it. With Springer, I understand it. Primo's always been a little bit tougher for me. Um, did you see Clutch's pro day?
No, I didn't
Okay.
watch it. I saw
Okay.
the highlights. I'm kind of off pro days because it only shows what guys are good at. I mean, I've been
Oh, I don't.
to a couple myself, and it's dribble, dribble, dunk, dribble, dribble, show off your athleticism.
Yeah, your open
Sometimes,
gym athleticism.
yeah, sometimes you may see a guy put on, a shooting display, but it's been so rehearsed. Like, the guy's been working on this same drill for months. And so if a guy can't shoot on the move, then he's only going to shoot catch and shoot shots. So I mean, on one hand, like the fan in me likes the excitement of pro days, but on the other hand, they're so scripted. And I would love the NBA to go back to. Actually, I would love for ESPN to show like a team workout where they're trying to throw guys off.
Yeah,
So
I mean, I always want to see the small sided games person in me wants to see a circumstance where you're like actually seeing decisions being made. Like as cool as it is to see Jericho Sims like put his whole upper body inside the rim, like I didn't learn anything else really from it other than like okay, this guy like is taking his body seriously, which is valuable. But there's been some changes in Kai Jones' shooting form. His feet are really wide. I generally don't believe in shooting changes during pre-draft in the lower body or like just like serious changes just because teams are most likely going to redo it, and for some guys just it can be difficult to learn something for 3 months, rehearse it, then redo it.
yeah.
I don't take too much information from it. There's it's difficult. Um, let's see. We have a question about uh, Jalen Johnson. Do you buy Jalen Johnson's shooting, and why/why
No.
not? That's a no.
No. Yeah, man. It's like when I watch, it's weird, right? So when I look at Evan Mobley, I look at his numbers, but I'm buying into him developing as a shooter. When I watch Jalen Johnson, I look at the numbers and I'm like, there's no way he shot 40% from three. I mean, he had some misses that looked like they were about to put a hole in the backboard. So uh, right now, no, I'm not buying into him being a shooter. I know it's a smaller sample size in games because he didn't finish the season, but he strikes me as a guy that doesn't have good natural touch.
Yeah, I need to see it. I liked some of what I saw the second time in Nicolette, where he was shooting off the dribble, but like volume. Like with Mobley, he didn't take that many threes, but he took a lot of like high challenge jumpers. Like he took a bunch of fadeaways, and you could see, even though he's three hesitant, you could see a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Jalen Johnson has never really shown that kind of stuff to me, and so I've always been a little bit hesitant with the shooting. I would have drafted him really, really high last year, and like because he was age eligible for last year's draft. A tough year.
Yeah, I mean, 44% from three, 63% from the foul line. I'm leaning more towards the free throw percentage being more accurate.
Hey, he could be the new Bruce Bowen.
Yeah, but he had some bad misses, yes. Like some shots where I'm like, yeah, it looked like a big shooting a three at the end of the shot clock. So, yeah, I'm not buying into it right now.
Okay, just gonna go rapid fire. Chris Duarte, thoughts?
He's going to fall to a playoff team and come in and be a contributor right away.
I'm going to go the opposite direction. He's going to get picked in the lottery because a team is not going to be able to congeal their 2 picks into 1. So somebody's second pick is going to take him.
Makes sense for the Warriors.
Yeah. Ayo Dosunmu, why are people so low?
I don't know. He made a mistake by coming back to school. I mean, he had a better year, much better year, and his draft stock did not increase. He possibly goes late first round last year. Maybe this year, but I don't think.
Yeah, I think he's a second rounder this year. Yeah, he didn't. He had a better year, but he like the idea was always that he was really dynamic, and I think that this year kind of showed that he didn't add that dimension. I don't think he fundamentally changed as a player. He just got better, and that's never like getting a little bit better is never enough to like keep your draft stock alive. Generally, you have to show some new dimension. I think that's why people are low because it's sort of the same package, and yeah. Let's see. What is the ceiling for Keon's jump shot?
Mm-hmm.
Counterpoint. What is the floor?
Oh man, for his jump shot.
Yeah.
I think he could develop into at least a league average, maybe 37% from three. I do think
I cannot get there. I'm sorry.
All right, I'll say it like this. 37% from three if he's only shooting catch and shoot. If he's trying to create, then no. But I think he can possibly get to 37 with good shot selection.
Okay, and then the last question, the one we'll finish out on. Have you heard my Jaden Springer height conspiracy before?
No.
Okay. So, Jaden Springer's dad is like 6'9". Both of his brothers are above 6'7", and his cousin is DeAndre Bembry.
Okay.
Do you think that there is a reasonable chance that Springer will end up wing size?
I mean, based off of that information, possibly because he's so young.
If I were to guarantee that he would be 6'7", would you take him in the top
5?
Top
5? No.
Top 10?
Right outside the top 10. I say lottery range.
Okay. Obviously every year that goes by, the conspiracy looks worse and worse. But, just because, like, when you're a sophomore in high school and you're like, yeah, his dad's, 6'9", 6'10", you're like, oh, okay. That's certainly something, because, some guys shoot up. And then every year that goes by, it's like, it'd be nice if he grew. He's 6'3" now. You're like, 6'7" would really be great. Yeah, if he were 6'7", I would probably take him number 4.
That's high.
I just at 6'7", like some of the stuff stops mattering. Like you don't need the Mark Jackson stuff. You're like, yeah, he's probably just putting the ball up and out at that point. But if he gets to be 6'7", we got to teach him how to walk again, which is always an issue. All right, let the people know where they can find your stuff. Plug away.
Yeah, so I have a podcast on Locked on NBA Draft. It's every Monday and Thursday. My website is nbadraftjunkies.com. And then I have my YouTube channel, same name, NBA Draft Junkies, where I do video breakdowns. I had this ridiculous goal of getting 100 prospect videos done, but I've been doing too many podcasts. So
I'm
I
so
won't be.
I'm so sorry to end to hurt the.
So,
You could have
yeah.
probably got 6 of those things done in this 2 hours. I'm so sorry to infringe on the dream.
Maybe barely one. I mean, I've been, I watch the film, then I have to write my notes down, and then I actually like rewriting my notes because some guys I may have notes from them back in November, and then it's changed. So I'm rewatching film. It's a long process. It seems like it should be.
I know. Oh,
It takes me a little bit, like 2 hours max, or sometimes, and then if it's like a voiceover, oh man, that's like a 4 hour process.
I cannot recommend this stuff enough. It's also just it looks so nice. You know,
Thank you so
I
much.
can say that like I have 5% of the technical ability. Like every time I watch one of your videos, I'm just like, man, this is I am enjoying watching this, and like we both spend a lot of time on Coach YouTube. Coaches be struggling, trainers be struggling. There's some bad arrows, there's some bad presentation, and I just want to say I really appreciate the level of like craft that goes into things you don't like necessarily have to do,
Yeah,
because it makes it so much easier to like go through, because like I've had times where I'm just like, this is not explained well. Like it's a coach could get it, but the accessibility that you have in the way that you present it is something that like it really helps the space, because it's pretty easy to make stuff for coaches and for you know people who are knee deep in the game, and like the accessibility level that you've been doing is really awesome. And just thank you so much for coming on. I'll let the people go. I know there's probably basketball people got to watch, podcast to run, um, you know, um, videos to break down. If you have subscribed to the YouTube, I appreciate you. If you are a Patreon subscriber, I appreciate you a lot. You have made all of this possible. Made basketball my full time gig. Thank you to Rafael Barlowe. Thank you to everybody. We're coming up on this draft. Try to do a lot of fun stuff between now and then, and hoping to have another stream for you guys soon. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful night.
thank you.